and call the meeting to order. Welcome everybody here today to our Oregon State Water Commission meeting, the Thursday, September, is it the 5th? Afternoon session. We'll go ahead and introduce everybody, I think, to start with, so we can get that down for the record. So I'll go ahead and start. Our Chairman Reeves is gone on family business, so I'm Bruce Korn from Ontario, and I'm the vice chair. So, and I represent the Eastern Oregon Division as commissioner. So we'll go ahead and start then with Eric and go around.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Eric Wemps, North Central Region. The best region of Oregon's many great regions, but welcome everybody, and just wanted to admonish my fellow commissioners for being late to the meeting before we get started. But just kidding. Good afternoon, everybody.
Everything descends into politics. Joe Mall. I'm going to say I represent all of the state of Oregon. Right? Yeah. West Central.
Kathy Kahara, East Side at Large, so I get the better part of the state.
Really, these introductions don't have to have political attachments.
Geographical.
Go ahead.
Geopolitical.
Mike Font, represents Southern Oregon, the other best commissioner region. I'm sorry, I can't leave that out now.
And in all seriousness, I'm Bob Baumgartner from the Northwest region, the other best part of the state.
I'm Tom Byler, Oregon Water Resources Department staff.
I'm Cindy Smith, Water Resources Department staff.
We'd also like to go ahead and start around the audience. So Doug, we'll start with you and just kind of weave our way through. So for the record.
Doug Woodcock, Oregon Water Resources staff. Eric Thomason, Water Resources staff.
Roy Boucher, Water Resources staff. Kat Schwartz, legislative staff.
Jeffrey, State Representative, District 48. Justin Anderson, Water Resources staff.
Jenna Ingram, Oregon Groundwater Association.
Jonathan Sickle, Oregon Groundwater Association.
Crystal McDonald, Mosher Watershed Council.
Ken White, hydrogeologist, retired, also Mosher Watershed Council.
Ivy Gall, Water Resources staff.
Linnea Whittaker, Department of District Services. Lisa Snyder, Water Resources staff. Smith Bear, Council, Oregon Farm Bureau. Roxy Nair, Oregon DEQ. Really Great State Waterways, Oregon. Howard Sear, Oregon Water Resources Department.
Ken Tiemann, Water Resources Department.
Mike Ladd, Water Resources Department.
Shiloh Olson, Wasco County Soil and Water Conservation District.
April Snell, Oregon Water Resources Congress.
Kelly Hasley, Wasco County Planning Department.
Kathy Schwartz, Wasco County Commissioner.
Dwight French, Water Resources Department.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. And I want to give a special thanks to the tour that we had this morning, all you locally that helped to make that a really informative and really interesting tour. I think we all really enjoyed our time and have a better vision of the challenges and struggles that you're dealing with here in Wasco County and the surrounding areas. So thank you. It was very informative. We did have the privilege of having 4 of our legislators with us this morning on the tour, and we really appreciate that. It was nice to have the opportunity to visit with them and appreciate their concern and the diligence that they put into issues of water. And we have one of our legislators here with us right now, and we're glad to have him, Mr. Jeff Reardon, Representative Reardon. So would you like to take a minute and make a few comments? Or
Do I need to sit in front of the mic?
it would probably be good and introduce who you are just for the record.
Yeah, I'm Jeff Reardon, State Rep for District 48, and it's really great to be here. And sometimes I wonder why, how I came to be here. But my district is very suburban and urban. I think most of my constituents would have no interest in my being here doing this kind of work. But I personally think it's so important, and I'm a real fan of our protecting our environment overall. So I think that's why I'm here. I just see the need for the legislature, for our citizens to pay attention to water issues before it's too late, and that's the bottom line. So I came today. I want to learn about water issues. I want to learn about water issues from the people that are working those issues on the ground. So this is a great opportunity to be here with you and to see all the work that's going on within that community by the agency folks, by the landowners, and how everybody really comes together to work on these problems. So as I think about this from a policy level, I think about, how do we govern this? Can we improve the governance? And right now, I'm seeing some pretty good models. So anyway, that's just kind of the stuff that's going through my little head. I'm really interested in how decision-making does occur, and then I think we need more champions within the legislature to be concerned about water issues. So I'm trying to do a few of these tours myself. I'm inviting some of my fellow legislators to join in wherever possible, and try to come up to speed so that we can be champions within the legislature and really understand when we're making policy or we're making budget decisions, have that based on some knowledge and some firsthand experience. And so that's why I'm here, and it's just a joy to be with all of you this morning, to start getting to know you. I think the better that we're connected, the better I can work with you as well. So, and I'll close with thanking you for what you're doing, because you got here on board on this big issue way before I did, and I thank you for that. So.
Representative Reardon, thank you for being here today, and thank you for your remarks. I think one of the things to take away from the tour this morning was the buy-in by so many, and those that are really putting their money where the need is to make this happen, and it goes from the state level down to the individual landowners. So people like yourself taking an interest when maybe it's not to the fullness of your constituency, really you're to be complimented for that, and thank you. Representative Byler.
Not representative.
Sorry.
I wanted to thank Representative Reardon on behalf of staff for being here and for taking the time to educate yourself around these complex issues. And I know we're just part of the water mosaic, and just really appreciate you taking the time and making the commitment that you are. It means a lot to us at the staff level. I also wanted just to convey to the commissioners, because I think this will be meaningful to you as it is to staff. If you were to visit Representative Reardon's office, you would see on the wall the fold-out of the Integrated Water Resources Strategy. And Representative Reardon's been a real believer in the framework and the breadth and scale of the strategy, and it's much appreciated. We're proud of that work ourselves and the partners that we've worked with to put that together. So it's nice to have that recognition at the legislative level.
Thank you, Director Byler. Okay, also before we move into the agenda, we have a special presentation, I believe, today, and we have a member of the staff that's retiring after 40-plus years, I think, and he's here. So, Mike Ladd.
So, Mike, back in the back row, Mike. One of the things that I'll just as a preface. I get for those of you who are on the tour, or for those of you who have spent time with the agency or at commission meetings, you know that we have a lot of great staff, a lot of fantastic staff. They're knowledgeable. They deal with people in very complex situations and very difficult situations. And it's my honor to be able to recognize folks for their years of service. And because there's nothing more valuable than the time that we're committing to what we do. And Mike Ladd is right up there at the top in terms of years of service, for one thing, but also just but for the battles he's been through, the things that he's seen, the work that he's done, and maybe more importantly, the knowledge that he has contributed to our conversations internally and with our stakeholders has been invaluable. Maybe even more important than that is how he's gone about his business, and he's just a true gentleman. He is respectful of people, no matter who you are and what you're doing, and that's always been how he's operated. It's something that I've appreciated greatly in my years with the agency, and so we're thrilled to be able to extend some appreciation for you today. I have a couple things that I want to give to you. I'm going to have to put my glasses on for one of them, though, because I have to read something. So, this is a letter from Governor Brown, and I'll read it for folks. Dear Mike, congratulations on your retirement after 40 years of public service with the Oregon Water Resources Department. As Governor of the state of Oregon, I would like to express my appreciation for your hard work and dedication to Oregonians in the management of our vital water resources. Your career history is impressive. You started as an assistant water master for Umatilla County in September 1975, working under the supervision of the water master. The department hired you as a water master working out of the Polk County Courthouse in November of 1978. You returned to Pendleton to serve as the water master in October of 1985 and were subsequently promoted to the North Central Region Manager position, where you have served since November 1989. On a number of occasions, you also served as the acting Field Services Division Administrator. In the world of Western water rights management, it is often said that whiskey is for drinking and water is for fighting. I understand during your career you witnessed firsthand how contentious and controversial water issues can be. Despite this difficult work environment, you have served the state with great integrity and distinction. You have listened to water users and treated them fairly and with respect. You have demonstrated a valuable and unique set of talents, including a deep and expansive expertise in Oregon water law and water management. Moreover, you have shown a genuine care and concern every day for your staff and colleagues, including mentoring and preparing your staff to advance their careers within the water management arena. Taking this all into account, you exemplify the attributes of an outstanding civil servant. On behalf of the people of Oregon, thank you for your exemplary service. And on your retirement path, of course, there's the blanket in case, you know, the pension doesn't cover the bills. There you go. Stay warm. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair Corin, if I may, just a few words. So you guys caught me big time by surprise here. One thing I'd like to say, my career with Water Resources has been awesome. I so much enjoy the people, been really vested in it, and it's been an honor and privilege to work with all of you. And keep up the good work. There's some huge challenges ahead, but we got some incredible staff, some very dedicated commissioners, and I know will rise to the challenge. So thank you very much. I'm very humbled by this, these surprises. Thank you.
Thank you for your service, and we appreciate all you've done over all these years for the good of the state of Oregon. So just had one other, and it's kind of an announcement, but this is also Commissioner Fott's last meeting with us as an official commissioner, and so I think there'll be some things that will happen a little later on when you join us at the next meeting, but we just wanted to acknowledge that this is your last meeting. And
that means I'm getting moved, is that no, thank you, Commissioner. Let me just say, and I'll speak to this tomorrow during our commission report, but I echo everything you've said about this commission and staff. I've only been on board for a couple of years. I'm really sad to be moving before the end of my appointment, but anybody asks me about the Water Resource Department or Commission, I have nothing but high praise. What a talented, and Mike, I think you said that well, what a talented group of people. When I watched that interaction today, we talk about the need to interact and be partners, but if it's forced, it doesn't work. And I didn't see anything forced at all today with those relationships. It was they're truly working together, collaborative, trying to find solutions. And you just can't make people do that. The folks that are here at the department really care, and caring is the difference. I think that I'm going to watch closely and cheer you on from the sidelines because I'm so proud to have been part of this. So thank you for letting me be a part of this for a short term. So.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate that. We'll go ahead and move on to agenda item A then, the Moser Basin groundwater update. So Justin, Aurora, and Eric. Looks like we need one more chair. Bring your own chair.
Thank you, members of the commission. For the record, my name is Justin Iverson, and I manage the groundwater section at the Water Resources Department.
My name's Aurora Boucher, and I'm hydrogeologist with the Water Resources Department.
And I'm Eric Thomaser. I'm the North Central Region Well Inspector out of our Pendleton office.
Okay, so this agenda item, we want to update you on a number of projects that all began about 2015-ish or between 2015 and now that have been ongoing the past few years to address groundwater level decline issues in the Mosier Basin. The tour this morning was obviously touched on all of these things, so we're just going to wrap it all up with the bow on it during this agenda item. For folks that weren't on the tour that were in the audience, I'll say I'm sorry we took a while to talk about the geology, and usually we start these talks out with a description of the system. I'm not going to do that here since we just spent the morning on it. We're basically going to jump pretty quickly right into these projects. So did want to throw a quick overview map up on the projector. So Mosier is just a few miles down I-84 to the west. This map shows a couple of boundaries. Mosier city limits in the light green, the groundwater restricted area where we have not allowed new water rights to be issued since 1988 is the dark, the solid black line, and then our special well construction standards area in the larger dashed black line. So just to show folks where we are. I guess I should also mention this for the commissioners. This map is in your staff report, and if you want to refer back to it, I think it would be a reasonable reference. Marked out here are locations of the Mosier Repair Project wells, some other wells for which we have water level plots. So just a real quick slide again to review the problem statement. Again, we've had declining water levels in the area really since development began in the 40s and 50s. This particular plot runs from about the 70s on, but you can just extend that back up. Water level decline started fairly quickly. Those declines are due dominantly to two particular things. One is more development than the resource could support, so we're taking more water out for irrigation than is naturally coming in. That leads to us drawing on the natural storage of the aquifer that's developed over thousands or tens of thousands of years. And also there's this commingling well issue that we talked about this morning. So commingling is defined as when a borehole penetrates multiple aquifers with variable pressures and creates a conduit for water to come out of one aquifer with a higher pressure and into an aquifer with a lower pressure. So it's that forming of a conduit. We gave a quick teaser on this video. This is a downhole well video at the deep Grand Ron Aquifer well we visited on our last stop of the tour. This camera will be steady at 1,122 feet, so the camera's not moving. This is a video of the flow from that lower aquifer under higher pressure flowing up past the camera. It's scouring out one of these sedimentary interbeds that we talked about, and that creates these nice kind of flocculants, if you will, that really show how the water is rushing past the camera there. So in the absence of sealing off all but one aquifer, again, the pressure differential in those aquifers would create this type of flow 24 hours a day, 7 days a week until the problem's fixed. And there were wells out there that were doing this for quite some time. So that can depressurize an aquifer over time relatively efficiently. So we we talked about on the tour again that problem, or at least the problem of the declining water levels, was observed as early as the 50s and 60s. It really started to create some problems for water users round about the 80s, and mid to late 80s, we started a more concerted study of the area, though some previous work had been done. And in '88, we closed the area to further appropriation, but we've continued to work in the area and better our knowledge or improve our knowledge over time. So again, coming up to a relatively present day, we've had 3 recent programs all aimed at addressing this declining water level issue. We're going to have a segment on each of these 3 on the special well construction standards, the well repair and replacement program, and the deep wells project. The upper 2 are aimed at the commingling issue. That deep wells project is aimed at the over appropriation issue, trying to take users off of the over appropriated aquifer and put them in a different source. So Aurora and Eric will be talking about that. Before we go into those programs, I guess I have an acknowledgement as well. Wanted to acknowledge Ken Light, who's here with us in the audience and who you met on the tour. Want to make sure and just reiterate that Ken's been out since the mid-'80s studying this area, and we are building on and continuing the work that he started. He's done a lot of things in the basin. I think that, again, we've mentioned the relationships a couple of times this afternoon already. My impression is that Ken really developed a lot of those relationships and brought the agency together with the local folks. So that his mentoring of the 3 of us and many others at the department and the work that he's done are much appreciated. So with that, we'll go to Eric.
Swap seats. Oh, nope. Excellent. So for those of you who were on the tour this morning, I covered how our special area standards for well construction work kind of at a general level. We'll dive a little bit deeper into that now. Our special area well construction standards were introduced in June of 2015, and this introduction was the result of a grassroots, community-driven movement and outcry and need for additional oversight and regulation on well construction in the basin, because the community in Mosier was so plugged into these studies that had been done prior to that they were aware that well construction was one of their primary concerns. So these were introduced in June 2015, and this was promoted and developed by and really driven by the community. What these do for us as an agency, as a department, is they increase our oversight and they require additional involvement from us. And there are some questions around that. Well, what exactly are the benefits of that? What does that do for the community in Mosier, and what does that do for the state of Oregon? And to dive into that a little bit, the process that we use to facilitate these rules in the basin actually provide us with a framework for that increased oversight and that department involvement. And when I say that it's process and science driven, I'll walk you through the process of a typical well being constructed in the Mosier Basin. So they're required to submit their start card with 10 days notice. The only caveat to that is if they contact the department, typically that's me, and we have a discussion, and I've done the research and I'm ready for them to start drilling, then I will go ahead and approve for them to get started on an earlier date than after the 10-day window. After that happens, I'll provide them with information about the location, and I'll let them know at what depths and what particular geologic contacts that they will most likely encounter water, so that they can be better prepared to evaluate some water-bearing zones that potentially may be lower yield, but in the end may serve their client's interests and may serve them a little bit better. To some of the folks in Mosier understand that 5 gallons a minute plus a cistern is a little bit more economical than drilling an 850-foot well and spending, $60,000 on it up front. So there's a different approach depending on who is the landowner and who owns the well. But the process is we provide them with that information. They begin drilling. They provide us with their rough log and cuttings. And through all of that information and then any additional data streams that we deem necessary through that process, whether we need a camera survey or whether we believe that borehole geophysics with our wireline tools is necessary to facilitate construction, we go through that process. Once we feel like we have a good handle on exactly what we're looking at, we then convey to the contractor the case and seal depth requirement, and they go from there. And they, of course, have to use compliant methods and so on and so forth. One of the other excellent byproducts of this set of rules and the implementation of these rules is its improved data collection from our drilling contractors, because they are required to provide us with any data that we deem necessary. So the quality of the drilling logs, or the rough logs, if you will, so their field notes, has dramatically improved in the Mosier watershed, and that has a lot of value for us internally. And we're also getting cuttings, and cuttings are integral in your ability to really nail down where the geologic contacts are inside of a basin. So in order to continue to build on the work that Ken has done over the last 30 years, 35 years, we will continue to need to collect this data. And it's fortunately a byproduct of the well construction rules that we have in place right now. So one of those excellent byproducts is that we have improved data collection. The other wonderful result is that we have improved compliance and resource health. We believe that in the long run, having this additional control and sort of regulatory presence in the basin and oversight over well construction is going to yield those results. And from a compliance perspective, those of you who were on the tour this morning, you heard that we've had some marked success in the watershed on that front. This map, I'm very sorry that it is so small. I actually expected to have a larger projection screen. So let me highlight a couple things for you here. This cluster right up here outside of the city of Mosier, just right there. So there was a Union Pacific Railroad oil train derailment that took place a number of years ago in Mosier, right at the Rock Creek Columbia River confluence. And those are the 23 monitoring wells that we see here. So this is a summary of drilling activity under our special area standards since their implementation in June 2015. We've had over 100 start cards submitted in that small watershed, which is really quite impressive. A lot of domestic development. Approximately, just so you're aware, approximately 30 of these, a little bit more than that, are related to the well replacement project, which I'll get into next. We've had a number of irrigation wells. Most of those are from the project, and then Mr. Molesworth's deep grant-funded Grand Ronde well, and then a lot of domestic development, and that's really what takes up the majority of my time in Mosier outside of dealing with project-related wells. So let's talk about the results of this. We've observed 100% compliance on all wells constructed, altered, or deepened in the Mosier watershed since the implementation of these construction standards. And I think that that speaks for itself. One of the other wonderful results of this is our relationship with the contractors that have worked in the basin has become absolutely wonderful. We've developed excellent rapport with them, and through this rapport and this good communication and relationship development, it's improved the quality of not only their data, but in the end result. So the end result of their work has been improved through the building of this relationship and through this communication and rapport, and it's a result of these special area well construction standards. The overwhelming response from the contractor community has been very positive. I know that one of the concerns from the contractors in OGWA when they looked at these rules was, well, how is this going to impact our bottom line? How is this going to impact our business? Is this going to take additional planning? What's the turnaround time for department determinations? So there were a lot of questions around how the implementation of these special area standards would work out in the end. And the overwhelming response from every contractor that I have personally dealt with in the watershed since the implementation of our construction standards has been very positive. Provides them with a lot of assurance. They can tell their client This is what the state of Oregon wants. They have control here, so their client has a lot of assurances that things are being done properly, and the final product is not necessarily guaranteed, but it provides that additional insurance policy, if you will, for the contractor. So that's part of their positive response. The other positive response we've had from them is that it has not had a negative economic impact on their business in that watershed. So the bottom line for our well construction standards is that we've had very positive feedback and positive results across the board. All right, I'm going to move into our well replacement project. Completion summary, we still have one well to do. Those of you who were on the tour this morning are aware of that. The Mosier well replacement project. The 2015 Oregon legislature responded to a natural resource need or an outcry from the community in Mosier. And Representative Huffman on the tour this morning actually kind of walked through how that went down. And this project and these dollars are a legislative response to a natural resource need and a community outcry. The result of that was $1 million to repair or decommission and replace commingling wells within the watershed. I'm going to go over a quick project timeline. 2015 to fall 2017 is when site assessments and prioritization of those sites took place. Spring 2018 to the present time, we have completed 13 priority project sites that have been either repaired or replaced. Decommissions and everything is complete. They have all of their water and power and everything sorted out and hooked up properly. And we have one more to go. So as it stands, the project has 2 abandonments and 1 new well to complete. We're waiting on our contractor to complete some rig repairs, which if you were on the tour this morning, you're aware that those happen every couple hours. So what happens beyond now? What are the next steps? So beyond completion of the first sort of phase or the first funding jolt for this project, we need to continue to monitor what the impacts of this is and continue to collect data in the basin, watch those water levels, compile it, get it in the right place, and see what it says to us. So we're kind of in the wait and see how things pan out, monitor our impacts on the watershed. Project site prioritization was done through GSI Water Solutions. The Wasco County SWCD contracted with them. And the way that worked, for those of you who are on the tour, this is a bit of a recap, but they did desktop assessments originally where they evaluated just the well logs and what other available data they could get and just evaluate in the office. From there, they developed a list of wells that they thought could be commingling, and then they proceeded to assess them in the field. Pull the pumps, pay for pump removal, pay to provide water to the landowner, and also get a camera system in there with a flag on it and survey the well and estimate potential commingling rates. After that was all said and done, it was all piled into this giant spreadsheet that was then prioritized based on a scoring matrix. And that scoring matrix consists of 3 particular criteria. Number 1 was, well, how close are you to the basal system boundary? How close are you to the bottom of the proverbial bathtub, if you will? What is the source aquifer? Is it basalt hosted, or is it hosted in other material that overlies the Columbia River basalt? And then the last piece of criteria was, well, what's this estimated rate of commingling? And I think they broke it into 3 categories. It was low, moderate, and high. The other thing I'd like to mention here is that this is where the Wasco County Soil and Water Conservation District, where their match dollars for the project came into play. They paid for these assessments, both desktop and field, and the access agreements portion of this was a multi-headed effort that was spearheaded primarily by the Mosier Watershed Council, and it was quite the process to watch them go through contacting landowners and garnering access agreements, or failing to do so in some cases. This is a map very similar to the one that Justin showed earlier. It's zoomed in on our 1988 withdrawal area, and that withdrawal area is the upper 2 most members of the Columbia River Basalt, the Pomona and the Priest Rapids. The purple dots are irrigation wells replaced on the project, and the yellow-orange dots are domestic replacements. The one thing that I want to point out on this particular slide is that every well, except for one well, is located within our withdrawal area. So it's important to recognize that our withdrawal area from 1988 coincides with the assessments and the prioritization that was done by GSI and by Ken Light. Project partners involved in this include the Wasco County Soil and Water Conservation District, the Mosier Watershed Council, and I have to say both of those entities have been exceptional to work with. They are extraordinary organizations. The landowners and the irrigators in the Mosier Watershed also have been phenomenal partners throughout this project. GSI Water Solutions has been involved, Walt Burt in particular. And then our partner in the contractor realm, our OGWA partner here, I suppose, is M&M Well Drilling, Mike Merritt. And it has been, there have been ups, there have been a few downs, but I think that's how drilling goes. I've spent the majority of my career at the back of a drill rig, and I feel pretty positive about how this project has gone from a drilling program management perspective. Things went really quite smoothly. Given the difficult drilling conditions in the Mosier Watershed, geologically, there's enough going on there that it can cause you a lot of heartache. And of course, the Water Resources Department. We partner with ourselves apparently on this one. I'm not sure why that's on there, excuse me. And the Oregon legislature. And I covered exactly what their part in all of this was earlier on.
So with that, we'll move on to our deep wells.
I do have a question, and go ahead, Mr. Fonavito, go ahead.
Just a quick question, Eric. Did you have any kind of estimate how much commingling was going on in each of the completed wells? And do we have just an estimate how much we were able to stop the commingling? Is there...
From a gallons per minute perspective, no, because the assessments were done using a downhole camera with flagging on them. In retrospect, I'd like to make the comment that, we now have some additional equipment that may improve our ability, and matter of fact, it does improve our ability to quantify that and characterize that.
Is that one of the tools we saw today?
The electromagnetic flow meter that I had on this one.
Well, I'm really pleased to see you have that new equipment, because I think that helps tell the story. I really appreciate, if I could, the problem is defined and the solutions were thought through very thoroughly, and you prioritized and looked for funding, I think, rightfully so, on these well replacements and the commingling. But it would be nice to show the direct correlation of how much water or how much the commingling we've been able to reduce. So.
I agree.
My question had to do with well inspection. It was made clear today that maybe we inspect less than 50% statewide. In this area where it's such a critical area, is that percentage much higher, or is that kind of typical here? Every well is okay.
There's one well I have not been able to get to, and it's on the very southern reaches of our Special Area Standards administrative boundary, and it's behind a locked gate, and the landowner is not cooperative. So it's been difficult on that front, but all but one.
So you're really confident that anything that's being done is being done properly now?
Yes, and that one well is a Dalles Formation well, which is the material that sits above the Columbia River basalt. And we have, as far as well construction concerns for the Dalles Formation, we have none. So,
thank you. Any other questions from commissioners?
Just,
oh, yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm curious. I found this just so very intriguing. It's more of a curiosity question. But now that you have implemented some of the controls, do you have an idea of how long it's going to take to be able to document whether you've stabilized the groundwater or whether we are seeing recovery of the groundwater?
Yeah, so kind of a guideline, I'm comfortable after about 5 years of saying, yes, this looks like a trend. Beyond less than 5 years, it's not necessarily enough time to tell. So not yet, but maybe in about 5 years, 3 years down the line, I'd be able to answer that.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. Looking at this chart, it looks like it's fairly level in the last 10. Is that?
So there's some hydraulic connection with surface water that plays into that. Ken alluded to it on the field trip this morning. That the elevation where it kind of flattened out in about 2004 through about 2014, that corresponds with the elevation where the Pomona daylights in the creek. So it looks like the water level was declining, and it got to this point where it was right at the creek, and that kind of controlled it for a while. And then when you're away from the creek, the water level's now declining below that elevation. There's a couple other flow zones within the Pomona that we're picking up water in also. That's our explanation for that. That's what we believe is going on there.
Yeah, those appear to be equilibrium elevations that correlate to contacts in the framework that daylight in Mosier Creek.
Any other questions?
I caught 101 start cards. Was that just 2019?
That's all activity since June 2015.
So 25 a year.
Since we instituted our special area construction.
So I'm curious how the county has interacted with this at all from a land use planning standpoint in terms of looking at, is that 25 a year average going to continue? You said most of them were home sites.
That's an excellent question. I have had zero contact with Wasco County on that particular topic.
Okay.
And I'm not sure if anybody else in the agency has.
Okay. Thanks.
Any other questions? Before we move on, if anybody in the audience has comments that you'd like to make, there's yellow cards just outside the door. Fill one out and give it to Cindy, and we'll give you an opportunity to make those comments today. So go ahead and turn the time to you.
All right. So on to the deep well. So again, you guys have seen this slide before. Columbia River is on the north at the top of this map, and Mosier is outlined in green there. We just went over this, so I actually won't go over it anymore. So the concept behind the Deep Wells project was that if we could provide some pumping stress relief from those over-appropriated, those declining aquifers, the Pomona and the Priest Rapids, then perhaps the water levels could start to come back up. And who benefits from this? As we just discussed, there's a number of exempt use domestic wells that exist and more that are existing. If we can bring the water levels, at least stop them from declining, all those domestic users benefit. There's about 36 permitted irrigators in the valley just within the withdrawn area. So I'm not talking about the whole area. This is just within our withdrawn area, the heavy black line there. So again, if the water is there, those irrigators and all the people that they employ benefit. And then also it's important to note that there's some hydraulically connected streams. And if we can get the water level in our aquifers back up, those stream segments stand to benefit also. So some of our individual landowners in Wasco County Soil and Water Conservation District and OWRD got together and they recognized that there's two irrigators that stepped up, and we recognized that if they could take their use, that they're pooling water from those upper basalt zones, if they could take that water and transfer it to a different, as of yet undeveloped, deeper source, that would provide about 30% of relief on the upper system. So they applied for supplemental water rights and received them, covering, I guess I didn't mention the hashed line, the hashed red areas are lands that are irrigated with groundwater. So then now these green areas within that withdrawn area are lands that are now covered under the supplemental water right from a deeper source that's as of yet, well, when they applied, as of yet untapped. So again, by taking about 25% of the irrigated land within this withdrawn area to a different source, they could provide estimated up to 30, a little bit more than 30% relief on that upper system. And so we got to work drilling the first deep well. I'm sure you guys have heard about some of the complications, and we've talked about it, I'm sure, today as well, so I won't go into that. Needless to say, as we were drilling, and we were drilling through the upper systems, we had a water level of about 360 feet below land surface. And kept drilling down, and we encountered more flow zones, and that water level stayed at about 360 feet below land surface. And then we tapped into that vantage horizon, that inner bed between our Frenchman Springs and our Grand Ronde. And up until this point, we did not know if there would be water in the Grand Ronde at this location. So this really was exploratory drilling at this point, and a lot of money being gambled on whether or not we'd find water down there. The good news is that we did find water. We found a whole lot of it. As soon as they tapped through the rest of that inner bed, they had water pressures of close to 500 pounds per square inch. So up to 500 gallons a minute pouring up the borehole at them. And even with that pressure, coming up the hole, the water level stayed right around the 360 feet below land surface. I think we mentioned that this morning, but this complicated factor of trying to repair something that's over 1,000 feet away from you, down a 15-inch corridor, while water's gushing at you at 500 gallons a minute was challenging, but they did eventually get the zone sealed off, and once they did get it all sealed off, our water level rose to about 33 feet below land surface, so the water level in the well came up over 300 feet once we finished sealing it off. So our final result is a well that's sealed from land surface to 1,153 feet below land surface. The total well depth is 1,223 feet below land surface. And just as a comparison, this is about 15% deeper than the Eiffel Tower is tall, which I find slightly mind-blowing. So you guys who are on the field trip this morning had an opportunity to see our first deep well, Swasco 52569. It was completed partway through the irrigation season of 2018. And again, it is permitted for supplemental irrigation of about 170 acres. In 2018, it pumped about 163 acre feet, so that volume of water was not being removed from the upper system. And as of when I went in and I made these slides, so a little over a week ago now, in 2019, we produced about 185 acre feet from that lower zone, keeping that much water in the upper zone. And just again, to highlight, you've seen this graph a number of times. This is our water level elevation of a number of wells throughout the basin. Our Pomona aquifer at this observation point has declined a little bit, but it's staying pretty steady. Our Priest Rapids and our Frenchman Springs are tied together. They're doing the same thing, wells have completed them, and so they have declined. But kind of the striking thing on this is our Grand Ronde water levels so far. We don't have enough data to really have a trend yet, but I just wanted to point out the striking separation. So these wells, the water level is up to a pressure of about 300 feet greater than the elevation in the upper zones. So, and I think with that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions?
Yeah, so how many of the deep wells are you anticipating? Two more?
One more.
Oh, just two. And that's another interesting way to solve the problem is bring in additional flows. Given what you told us today, you still have to monitor and see how successful those are, but I think a good, innovative, the bentonite, that was a great solution. I don't know who came up with that, but that was a great solution to that. 500 pounds of pressure, a lot of pressure. So.
Any other questions?
Just one clarification request. I think, Ken, today you said roughly 900 acre feet. Did I catch that right? For the sort of, I'm trying again to just get a sense of scale. Is that the
Of what?
the sort of total, as I understood it?
Yeah, I understand the question also.
For the record, this is Ken Light. So what I was, oh, okay, thank you. Sorry, Eric. So by my calculation, there's a little over 900 acres of primary irrigation. And what these wells, again, by my calculation, the two wells combined would be about 37% of that.
So 900 acres irrigated, not 900
Primary-
acre feet?
No.
900
I
acres.
think it's 918 or something.
Okay.
Yeah.
But they was using about an acre foot a day, or not a day, a year, so.
So each acre is allowed 3 feet of water
3 feet.
to be, up to 3 feet of water to be applied on it. So we've got 242 acres that are covered by this supplemental water right. So if you applied 3 feet per water. Now, these two irrigators actually own a tiny bit more land. So I think the original calculations, if they had converted all of their land, their full acreage, our estimate was that we'd save about 660 to 990 acre feet of water per year. And they didn't quite get all of that land covered of the supplemental water rights. But so just less of 900 acre feet per year, given that 3 feet per acre.
So that 170 acres that was covered by 180 feet, that they also had other water source still.
Yeah, so they still have their primary water right. So if they need to return to their primary source, we didn't want them to end up not having a water right. So it was important that they kept their primary one. They're shifting to using their supplemental water right, but we don't want them to not be whole.
Yeah, and I guess just to clarify, the values that we had a couple slides here ago.
Right there.
These were partial seasons.
Right.
So the well was completed partially through the 2018 irrigation season, so that 163 acre feet was not a full season.
Not a full season, and we're not done with the
And we're
current
not done
season.
with the season yet, so this 185 is as of last week or 2 weeks ago, so they'll be continuing.
I thought they'd abandoned their old well, though.
Oh, this is from the new well. So-
Right.
So
They're
this is
getting from
not,
other wells, they're getting,
Yeah.
to get their total 3 feet.
They're not
don't-
applying a full 3 acre feet per acre.
Okay, that's kind of where we was getting to, wasn't it? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and again, for me, the nexus with the land use planning and what's going to happen in this region across the state, especially as you look at coming from the Willamette Basin and the projections of shifting land use away from agriculture towards more urban uses. Some of it's justified on the, hey, it'll be better from a projection standpoint because the per acre uses go down. What that does to a landscape, what that does to a community, what that does to an economy. Representative Reardon, I know that you also work on some of the programs related to conservation of ag land and agricultural economy, so that's why I think that making sure we understand the implications of this for land use in the county is imperative. And this is extremely helpful to project the kind of changes that we might have to manage that we can't even anticipate at this point. So really valuable stuff. Really
Well,
appreciate the work.
The question that was asked out on the field trip about regular sprinklers as opposed to micro and drip, I thought that maybe that's where he was getting at, that they had that kind of savings, a savings of half the water by more efficiencies. But that was just an assumption on my part. Is that?
so I don't know if this was talked about for that part of the field trip, since unfortunately I wasn't at that stop. Mr. Molesworth does have soil moisture probes.
Right.
So okay, good. So it's being careful to not overwater. And so he may not need the full 3 acre feet per acre to grow his crops with the soil moisture and then also the micro emitters and drip. It's much more careful control of where water is applied and how much is applied.
It costs quite a bit to pump water, so it's very much in the grower's interest to pump as little as possible. And my understanding is that his price is totally used for those acres. He's not using any of the pre-strapped water.
Yeah, he's only using his supplemental water right. He has not been pumping off of the Priest Rapids since this well went online.
And there's not that much season left. It tells me that he's getting by with maybe half what he was prior to this because of efficiencies of his irrigation
Yeah, he's
systems.
getting better use efficiency because of the sort of big data technology that they're implementing with the soil moisture probes.
And
They're
the-
using micro emitters,
right.
they're using drip, and they're also constantly dialing in the variable frequency drive on the turbine motor for maximum efficiency. So he's always looking to improve that.
Right. Thank you. Any other questions?
Just, I'm going to follow up on one question, if I may, Bruce.
Sure.
Can you go back to the slide that shows the groundwater depletion over time, please?
Yep, yeah.
Hey, you're good. Bruce noted that there was a rapid decline, looks like it's stabling or flattening out. And I want to make sure I understood what at least part of the response was. And what I understood was that may be influenced by water actually coming in from a tributary?
No, along the main stem of Mosier Creek itself.
Yeah, well, I guess that's what I think is a tributary, sorry.
Yeah.
But so that water from Mosier Creek is coming in.
Yes.
Is that influencing anybody's water right in Mosier Creek or the beneficial uses of Mosier Creek itself?
I know that Bob Wood, our water master here in the Dalles, has never regulated on Mosier Creek.
There are certainly surface water rights that pull water from Mosier Creek, at least on paper. I don't know how many of them are actively used. But yeah, Bob doesn't have to regulate people off frequently, which isn't to say we would never have to, but I don't think he has to frequently.
Okay, thank you. Thanks. Any other comments, questions? Thank you very much, and thank you again for the tour this morning and all that was involved. It was really important. We look at these now, and we have historical background and eyes on that makes it a whole different picture than it was before. So, thank you.
Thank you.
So,
Can I?
if you're willing to stay.
Hey, Eric, can I just ask you, how much did that camera cost?
Oh, that camera system, I think when we purchased it, it was in the $12,000 range. But a big part of that expense is the winch reel, and the camera itself is, it's pressure tested up to 600 PSI. So it's a big part of the cost is the camera sealing as well. So,
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, we'll go on to agenda item B, the Walla Walla groundwater update. And Justin, looks like your solo act on this one.
Thanks, Commissioner Corn and members of the commission. So again, for the record, my name is Justin Iverson. I manage the groundwater section at the department. And this agenda item B is a ongoing update on Walla Walla Basin groundwater. So we've been providing a number of these through formal presentations and through the director's report over the last couple of years. We'll just briefly reiterate the problem statement, which is similar to what we just talked about in Mosier. We have a basalt aquifer system underlying the Walla Walla Basin that has been in decline for a number of years. Little different view here. I've got the Walla Walla Basin spatially. I'll see if I can use this technology here. Oh, what do you know? So I guess a bit more locating. Walla Walla Basin is up here in northeast Oregon, north of Pendleton. Milton Freewater is the main town that sits here. Have uplands of the Blue Mountains, which are Columbia River basalt here, and this kind of backwards checkmark shape, I guess, valley filled with sediment on top of the basalt. Each dot here is a basalt well for which we have water level data, and the size and color correspond to measured or I guess period of record declines in water level. The largest reddish locations have declined between 150 and 200 feet over the period of record, going down to the smaller greens and blues, which are 0 to 10 feet. I guess I'll caveat that a lot of these blue dots you see polka dotted in here are wells that we have just recently begun to monitor, so they might have just one record, in which case the water level decline over period record will be 0 or 2. So it's variable period of record. But the main takeaway is that we have a pretty widely distributed area of decline across the Walla Walla Basin. So it goes from east to west and north to south. Where we have a longer period of record, we're generally showing declines. We've talked during previous meetings about our actions to address the problem. We really started focusing on this area in 2016 when we had some senior basalt groundwater users requesting WRD to take action because they weren't able to get their usual and accustomed amount of water. That led us to take a closer look and increase our data collection in the area, but we also started meeting with the community. So each blue triangle on this timeline is a public meeting that we held in Milton Freewater. The Walla Walla Basin Watershed Council really helped us out with spreading the word to its patrons and folks in the community. We have had really good turnout, 100 people or more at some of these meetings. And we started out kind of describing the geology and the problems that we saw, and we moved into talking about potential regulatory actions to address it. And what we were really doing is learning lessons from our Harney Basin experience and trying to apply those early in the process in Walla Walla. So the public outreach, we've been doing it kind of ad hoc with technical groundwater staff running public meetings, so doing our best to learn from our colleagues in the Water Resources Development Program that are doing the place-based planning and putting that to use. So we, for a number of years, have been out there meeting with folks, grabbing more information, and about here on the timeline, mid-2019, I have this marked as Policy Option Package 102. That was the designator for request that the agency put forward and that the governor supported and put forward in her recommended budget, and then that the legislature also supported and moved forward to a funding position. That gave us 6 new staff and $800,000 in funds to enter into these cost share agreements with the USGS and others for basin studies, as well as for drilling these dedicated observation wells similar to what we saw during the tour today, and allows us to essentially enter into a large multi-year detailed groundwater basin study in addition to the work that we're doing right now. So it gives us resources to do 2 of these studies at a time, whereas before we only had the resources to do 1 at a time. So I'm going to talk about 2 initial steps, some geologic mapping that's going to span the next year, and this USGS Cooperative Basin Study that's going to go beyond 2021. So just to orient you to where we're going. So as I mentioned, we received these new study resources, and that will be essentially ramping up our data collection in the area. The Walla Walla Basin is our priority for the next basin study because of, there's conflict there, there's a recognized groundwater level decline issue that's affecting the whole basin, and because honestly, we've gotten a jump on it. We've already started our outreach to the community, and we've already ramped up our data collection. So we have a bit of a, we were anticipating that eventually, even if we weren't able to get this additional resources, that we'd be moving into the area eventually. So because we were out there and already thinking about what we were doing, we were also talking with the Oregon Department of Geology and Mineral Industries, DOGAMI being their acronym, about geologic mapping in the area. So Again, the deep aquifer system there is basalt, similar to what we saw today. However, we're in a different part of the state, different tectonic action, or perhaps a different result of the same large-scale tectonic action. This area is at the nexus of two pretty significant fault zones that kind of create the front range, if you will, of the Blue Mountains there. And we realize that those faults, or we've gathered data that infer that those faults create some vertical connections. So unlike in the Mosier area where things were very distinct as far as the layered aquifers, here we found that as we go deeper, we're into hydraulically connected aquifers. And certainly there's some commingling wells out here as well, but it seems as though the faulting in the area is also allowing some conduits, some vertical conduits. That being said, we don't have a real great, or not as detailed as we would like, understanding of the system, and we have really quickly with this, with these additional funds, entered into a contract with Dogami to better understand the distribution of faults and folds in the basalt units. They had a USGS data set of aeromagnetic geophysical data that has been collected but not analyzed. So they're going to be analyzing a really rich, spatially extensive data set, as well as doing on-the-ground field mapping. And they're going to put together two detailed geologic maps that are in this pink area, really right in the center of our focus area. And that's going to be coming out about this time next year, so a fairly rapid turnaround. And that'll really help form the baseline of continuing on with the basin study. We have started to talk with USGS about a cooperative cost share basin study, again, similar to what we're doing in the Harney Basin, but focused on a different area, and therefore what's important are kind of the more important hydrologic connections are a bit different here than they are in the Harney. One of the main points of discussion we've been having so far is what are going to be the boundaries of the study. So the Walla Walla Basin, there's only about a third of it in Oregon. There's 2/3 up in Washington. The state line is not a hydraulic barrier. And we have discussed quite a bit. So this map shows the natural hydrologic boundaries of the Walla Walla Basin system with the dark red line, and then various sub-basins with the kind of brighter red lines. And we've talked about various northern boundaries. Ideally, we would have a study of the whole shebang. And to do that, we're going to need partners in the state of Washington. And we're also talking with the tribes about partnerships. So we've started to reach out to folks at the Washington Department of Ecology and really suss out if we can jointly come together with a joint study with the GS, that's the U.S. Geological Survey, both the Oregon Water Science Center and Washington Water Science Center staff. So discussions ongoing about the partners that we'll bring in potentially. And I want to say that it's been mentioned a couple of times, both on the field trip and today, that this community engagement and involvement early in the process and bringing on as many folks as we can to be partners with us in these studies has really shown promise for the end result, and for both building better understanding and confidence in the science that comes out, as well as a greater understanding of the system when we get to talking about management strategies. So we're really committed again to local engagement. We have a strong desire to partner with other entities, with the state of Washington and the tribes being the dominant ones, but also with the local watershed council has been very involved on both sides of the border. They're a natural entity to partner with. and on down the line. We've started collecting data, and we plan to do some opportunistic data collection this fall, just because we don't want to let the period after the irrigation season and before the snows fall, when we could really collect some good base flow data. We don't want that to pass us by, so we are working with the GS on a real small budget to just do some initial data collection, but really the final scope and the boundaries of that study are as yet to be determined, and we'd like to engage with the community more before we finalize those. So next 6 months-ish, we're really going to be reaching out, trying to build the partnerships, trying to build the scope, and I'm sure that we'll come back many times over the next number of years to update you on our progress. But that's where we're at so far. So with that, I'm happy to answer questions.
Yeah, Justin, this kind of dovetails on my question earlier, and that's really, as I hear how complex it is just to do a single basin, and I agree 100% starting this outreach early on is the only way to do this, but it still begs the question to me of, is there any way to try to assess total need of basin studies, or, and I talked a little bit more specific about monitoring wells, but I think it really is bigger than that. It's really the basin studies. And if we got the capability of trying to figure out, rather than what's the next one, what the problem is, but from a statewide perspective, what's the need and how might we, because this is a multi-year approach, so
Yes.
we're a long ways out from gathering all the data we need, I think. But
Yeah.
so sorry to put you on the spot with that. But.
No problem. No, Commissioner Fott, thanks for asking the question. We, as part of our effort to, well, how do I put this? We have looked ahead, and we've said, well, where in the state do we need these studies? And boy, I think it was 2017, I was presenting in front of the commission. What information do we have? Well, we have some information for everywhere in the state. There are areas where we have a lot more than others, and we've gone through and I think identified 12, and that's not all of them, but kind of the 12 next most important basins, and the reasons that those are important vary. Some of them are conflict, some of them are the desire of the community asking us to come in and do a basin study so that they can better understand their resources. Some of it's groundwater surface water connections, some of it's declining basalt aquifers. So there's a number of different reasons why we have these areas on our future studies list, but certainly we've got a number of those, and I might be able to rattle off half of them off the top of my head, but that's.
I didn't mean to, I think that's, I'm impressed that you have the 12, but, and I'm also impressed that you're thinking ahead, but I think as we try to capture the problem, the bigger problem statewide, understanding the need for those basin studies as well as the monitoring wells, the data really, we need to, you're making decisions right now based on data that are going to produce great results for us. And I just want to make sure we're looking at that statewide as well. So.
Yes.
Thank you. Director
Mr. Chair, if
Bauer.
I just might add to Justin's response, I agree with the way he characterized things, but I wanted to also point out a couple things. One is we've been getting similar questions from the stakeholder community who are interested in this work to have us kind of develop a priority list of, if we have so many resources, where are we going next? And part of that is because they want to be able to help try to get the resources to do it, and they want to know whether they have skin in the game or not, and that makes sense. The other comment, I guess, is that not every basin needs a robust basin study from our vantage point. So we're not covering every square inch of the state with this.
Of course.
That, I think, is a bit of a shift in terms of how we framed things in the past, but I think I think we're being strategic and realistic in terms of knowing how large the scale this endeavor to do basin studies across the state is going to be, making sure that we have our ducks in a row in terms of where we want to go next, and understand that not every basin is the same in terms of the need of having that depth of review.
Thank you.
So Tom, is that not every basin having a need primarily based on a sense of urgency? Relative lack of urgency in other basins? Is that the
I'll
driver?
quickly get out of my bandwidth on this one, so I'll look over to Justin. But my sense is that not all basins rely on groundwater, for example, like some of the basalt areas that we visited today, and the Harney Basin. And so they're, like the coastal areas, aren't going to have that same type of need. It doesn't mean they don't need study. It doesn't mean they don't need work, but it may not be the kind of the full-blown comprehensive study that we're talking about that we're doing in the Harney and the Walla Walla. Thank you.
Well, those are prompted by critical declines that are happening every year, increasing. So obviously they're at the forefront. So, any other questions?
Just another follow-up, and thanks, Tom. And as I guess my only, you gotta like the strategic side of this, but as we see climate change, we see declining water throughout the state. I think this model is brilliant, quite frankly, and so being able to use that throughout the state, timing-wise, becomes the real question. That even 12, as you look at how long this takes, is a big. It's going to take a lot from staff perspective to get that accomplished.
If I may just add to that, there was. You met Representative Helm earlier this week, or today. It's been a long day. And he had his own legislative or budget initiative that was parallel to our Package 102 that Justin talked about, and it was much larger and grander in its vision. I think they were looking to have allow us to do as many as maybe 8 studies concurrently. I can't remember the exact numbers, but it would have been, to your point, it would have been a significant influx of resources and capacity for us to be able to carry out multiple basin studies concurrently across the state. That's a great idea. I think it's difficult. It would be difficult to put into practice just in terms of being able to staff up and for us to have the resources. Even if we had the resources, it might be hard to find the expertise to actually carry out a lot of those functions at that scale. But we were very thrilled that the conversation was happening about putting more resources than we were asking for in our Package 102.
Thank you. You know, to me, the glaring problem with this one is Washington, are they buying in, or are they just kind of listening to what you guys are doing, or do you feel like they're ready to become partners in this because 2/3 of the aquifer is in Washington? You know, it's kind of, if we take care of 1/3 and do everything we can, it's going to be to their advantage and at the harm of this side. I mean, is there a partnership developing that you feel good about, or is it just lukewarm?
So, Commissioner Corn, maybe I'll start off and then pass to Tom. From my perspective and the folks I've talked to, it seems really positive and really optimistic, and they would like to work with us. There have been a number of other conversations going on with bi-state cooperation in addition to this, so this kind of plays in as one component, and at that, then I'm out of my depth. So.
I'll just add a little bit, and Commissioner Quims might have some observations as well. We've been, at my level, I've been working with peers with the tribes and with the Department of Ecology on kind of these issues, the cross-border issues. And so we've been having some conversations over the past year that I think have been very productive and are setting the stage for some potential collaboration that could be really significant in the Walla Walla in particular. So I think things are ripening. I think the timing is good. On the Washington side, they have their own issues. They have their own concerns. And in fact, I think the dovetailing of the issues that are arising on the Oregon side of the border and the issues that are arising on the Washington side of the border, including, and in addition to the interests of the tribes, are all kind of coalescing at the same time. So I think it's an opportunity, and we've been, Commissioner Quemps and I have been sitting in a group with Ecology, we're calling ourselves the Three Sovereigns at this point, and with the notion that we all have kind of broad interests in water in that area, and that we should be working together in terms of how we manage that resource for the future. and work with the community in addition. So those conversations are starting, but things seem to be lining up pretty well. And I don't know if Eric had anything to add.
I would agree with that. You know, I think they've expressed an interest to work with us. There's, you know, I think they've learned some lessons in places like the Yakima Basin. They appreciate the value of things like these USGS cooperative studies, that they take time, but they're necessary to inform a lot of decisions. You know, a lot of people in the Walla Walla are really wanting more water, but it's not as simple as just creating a water supply project. There's a lot of groundwork to do in understanding the aquifers and all the different uses, and then protecting that flow once it hits a state line. And because if we can't do that, we're, you know, more water isn't going to be the solution. That it's just not going to be effective. And I think they appreciate that. I made a point to them that when we made those rules, and I was in Mountain Free Water with Mike Ladd, listening to the Rules Advisory Committee, and they said clearly, you know, we're willing to do this, but we're not going to keep doing this in Oregon if Washington isn't going to step up and help protect the water. And I was able to refer to that in a meeting with Ecology and with Tom. And I do think they're interested in trying to solve that by-state issue.
Good. Because to me, that's the glaring, more than the tribal state of Oregon issues, is Washington. It just seems like that, at least from the reports we've got, that they've just kind of been lukewarm and sitting back on this deal. Is that a wrong perception?
I think they took an approach where they deferred to the locals for a decade on that side of the state. It gave them the opportunity to both create flexibility for users and provide in-stream flows. But there was never any flow protection means developed to go along with that. There was a lot, there was improvements in flexibility, but not significant improvements in in-stream flows. And there's, issues with groundwater use that are related to that. So there's a complex context. It's not just any one use that's the issue, and they all need to be addressed looking out, probably talking 30 years of looking at major work elements and what policies and rules would need to be adopted, and what kind of projects might be funded, and it's a comprehensive package that will need to be developed.
Thank you.
Maybe if you all resolve this, we can get a new I-5 bridge, too. I had a question about maybe the fourth sovereign. Is USGS funding a limiting factor? A big limiting factor?
Sorry, limiting how?
If there was more federal funding available for USGS to drive a little harder, would that greatly improve the prospects of bringing Washington further along to the table, or whatever the dynamic is there?
So the way that the cost share works from the USGS perspective is that they have a pot of cooperative study funds that goes to each water science center. So each state has its own water science center, and they can only access those federal funds if they get local partners, which is anybody that's a taxing authority. So you heard this morning that the Mosher Watershed Council, and I'm not sure if the Soil and Water Conservation District was also I think they might have had to have been, but they contracted with the GS in their own cooperative study. So it doesn't need to be with the state of Oregon. But the state of Oregon has a set pot of money that they can allocate as cost share. Washington Water Science Center has a separate pot of federal funds they can allocate as cost share. There's a third pot that's allocated to cost shares with tribes. So I mean, we would love to get more than a 60-40 match. How's that? But we haven't, to my knowledge, at least in the recent past, had the GS say to us, we can't match your funds. So as much money as we've been able to bring, they've been able to match at 40%. So does that answer your question?
If I might just add to that, Yeah, the real short answer is that federal funds haven't been a limiting factor. It's been whether we could get state funds to activate that pot of federal funds. The ratio is going in the wrong direction. It used to be 50-50, and now it's gone 60-40. So the federal government's being more, a little bit more conservative with their investments. But that hasn't been an issue to date in terms of accessing the funds for USGS. I would also add, in terms of the suite of partners, potential partners here, in looking at this basin on a more holistic level, is the state of Washington has resources as well. And of course, the tribes have access to resources and avenues that are unique to tribal entities. So the partnership could be pretty strong in terms of being able to leverage resources from a variety of different angles.
Thank you.
Any further questions? If not, thank you, Justin, for your report.
Thank you.
So move on to item C, 100-year water vision, and Deputy Director Woodcock and Director Byler.
I'm going to ask Raquel Rancière to join us as well.
Okay.
And we're going to tag team a little bit on this.
Can we take a break for 5 minutes? Is it okay if we take a break for 5-10 minutes?
Yeah, sure.
We'll go ahead and take a about 10-minute break, and then we'll reconvene. So it's 3:26. We'll 3:35. We'll try to reconvene. Okay.
Thank you, Commissioner Keller. So this presentation is on the Oregon's 100-year water vision, and we've got a series of slides that we're going to step you through, but we're going to move through pretty quickly. We want to try to catch up some time. What I want to engage with you on today is to, one, describe the vision at a high level and how it's connected to the Integrated Water Resources Strategy. Secondly, we'll kind of lay out where we're at in terms of trying to move the ball forward around the water vision. So you'll see the draft vision itself, the problem statements that have been drafted associated with that, and we'll talk about the process that lies ahead in the coming months. And then we'll also talk a little bit about the organization that underlies that at the state level and with partners. So let's step through that. I also want to emphasize that we'll be bringing this back for some more conversation in November. So there'll be some opportunity for some dialogue and feedback and conversation between staff and the commission at the November meeting. So let's first talk about the Integrated Water Resources Strategy. You're all familiar with this. The Integrated Water Resources Strategy was directed to be developed by the Water Resources Department in conjunction with a number of state agencies and many other partners by the state legislature, I think in 2009, as through legislation. Our first strategy was developed in 2012, and we recently updated in 2017. Probably the main point to make about a couple main points to make about the Integrated Water Resources Strategy. One is it covers water issues in Oregon writ large. Everything that you could connect water to is recognized at a high level within the Integrated Water Resources Strategy. So it's not just the issues that our agency is responsible for. It has to do with water quality issues. It has to do with the water energy nexus, the water land use nexus. Has to do with ecosystems and watershed health. It has to do with the need for funding and for infrastructure. There's a wide range of public health, public safety related issues that are recognized, and recommendations are built out of relative to the Integrated Water Resources Strategy. If you could just back up just one quick minute. Here, just as a reminder, there's a real basic framework that the IWRS is built on, and then it's four elements to that. One is we need to understand the resource. Groundwater, surface water. We talked a lot about that today as we were out in the field and in the previous two reports. Secondly, we need to understand what our needs are going forward, both in-stream and out-of-stream. And third, we need to understand some of the cross currents that affect that equation from the standpoint of climate change, population dynamics, other elements that are that we have to take into account if we're going to be making smart decisions in terms of crafting our water future. And the fourth element is we just need to take action to meet those needs. And so the IWRS is built around that framework. And we can move on to the next item. The 100-year vision is really connected very directly to that with the idea that we hope that it will serve as a catalyst to help drive forward many of the recommendations within the Integrated Water Resources Strategy. I'm not going to go through all the elements here, but the bottom line for the 100-year vision is a desire to, recognizing climate and population changes. We want to provide a future path for our communities to meet their water needs in the broad range, and balancing the environment, the economy, and wildlife and ecological needs for the future. The vision is built on the notion that we have to make strategic investments in built and natural water systems or water infrastructure to support that triple bottom line of community, environment, and the economy, and that we should do so working with communities in partnership to evaluate our needs and figure out our path forward. If we can go to the next slide. This is, there's a lot here, and I'm not going to go into the details here at all, but the main point is that under the IWRS, there are, 50 or so recommendations. There's on the left-hand column, you'll see a row or a column of bullets. Those are some of the recommendations, or at least partial expression of some of those recommendations in the IWRS. On the right-hand column, you have kind of a framework within the 100-year vision around health, economy, environment, and public safety. When you dig into the 100-year vision and the IWRS, you can see the cross connections, and that's the main point here, is that while we have safety and health as goals within the 100-year vision, you can go to the IWRS and look through the recommendations and see how they connect. So there is it's a very important point, I think, to make for us, because at least initially when the 100-year vision idea came out about a year ago, it created some confusion in terms of, does this replace the IWRS? Is it different? And the answer is no. It augments and provides a catalyst, we hope, that will help drive forward a lot of the goals and recommendations that are in the IWRS. So, very quickly on the draft water vision itself, the premise here is something that I think all of us understand. It doesn't take long working with the commission or the department to understand that we have a lot of infrastructure, both built and natural, that is aging or in need of investment. On the built side, of course, we know that a lot of the infrastructure that has served Oregon's communities, whether it's dams, levees, dikes, tide gates, irrigation delivery systems, or even wells, quite frankly, have atrophied over time and are in need of reinvestment, and those investments are significant. On the natural side of things, we have a dynamic of understanding that we need to balance our water needs to make sure that natural systems are complementing the more people-oriented systems, because we know that there'll be benefits from those, both in terms of fish and wildlife, but also water quality, public health issues, et cetera. So there's, I think, 3 slides here that are coming up, and I'm not going to go into this other than to say that these are 6 problem statements. These are attached to the staff report that you have in your materials, and they are attempts to kind of characterize the value of water in a variety of different ways. We have the expression of need associated with needing to modernize our systems that benefit communities and the economy. There are the clean water and fish and wildlife ecology needs, public health, planning, public safety, the need for data. All of those elements within these few slides are within the draft vision statement. And we'll talk about this in just a second in terms of the process going forward, because these are important elements, and that we want to start engaging with communities around the state on and get feedback on whether we're characterizing these issues appropriately. Are we, are we using the right words and language? Are we covering the right issues? So thank you, Raquel. That gets into what we are now embarking on, which is a phase 1 associated with the 100-year water vision. We have just kicked off, I guess a couple weeks ago, at the Oregon Coastal Caucus Economics Summit. Maida Lofsgarden and myself, Representative Reardon, and a number of other folks, John Huffman, who you met on the tour, were on a panel, and we talked about water infrastructure needs, built and natural, and the need for resources to be able to carry out the improvements and modernization that we know needs to happen today. So that kickoff involves a suite of actions that we're going to do as part of phase 1. And one of the things that we want to be able to do is to get out and listen, learn, and gather information from around Oregon. So we're going to be sitting down with folks and getting their feedback on this draft document that you have in your materials. And we are hoping through that to refine the vision statement and the problem statements. Also increase awareness and interest in these issues, because it's going to be important that we have public support for this if we're going to be successful. We will also be looking to address and develop a better baseline, if you will, in terms of our understanding of data available and data gaps relative to the conditions for surface and groundwater. This is not an exercise in doing new studies, but more of kind of an inventory of what we know and how this relates to built natural water infrastructure systems around the state. We'll also be looking at and starting conversations around priority data needs associated with how do we identify priorities around modernizing and investing in infrastructure decisions going forward in the future. And we'll also be looking at wrapping our arms around current state and federal funding around infrastructure. There's a lot of different pots out there, and being able to kind of pull that all together would be a useful tool going forward. So I may hand this off to Raquel and Doug here, who have been working both at a couple different teams. Raquel's been working with the implementation team, which is a small group that's kind of looking at high level, how do we move the ball forward for the vision, knowing that there's a lot that we want to be able to do. Doug has been sitting in on what we call the Water Core Team, which is an agency level and deputy director level team of agencies who have a nexus to water issues, state agencies, that have been meeting for a year now, or maybe a little bit more, yeah. Working on a wide range of shared issues, issues of shared concern, I guess, including helping to kind of build and help us kind of build the foundation around the conversations that we want to have around the state, around the water vision. So if you guys maybe want to step us through the upcoming actions, either one of you. Okay.
Okay. Chair Corn, Commissioners, for the record, Raquel Rancière, Senior Policy Coordinator with the Water Resources Department. So I think these are all in the planning phase. There's not going to be a lot of detail, but this is intended to be a broad effort. So the phase 1 is really intended to throw the net as far as possible. So within that, there's these various actions that are outlined. We'll start with the bottom one because this is what we're doing today in part. But there have been and will continue to be presentations to raise awareness at a number of meetings. The other items that I'd highlight here are then the interviews and online feedback. So we'll be doing some interviews with, and we're working with, I believe it's Oregon Consensus. So they'll be conducting interviews with organizations in order to provide some input on the water vision. The water academies are essentially a shared learning exercise. Those ones will be broadcast, so you'll be able to watch that online. And that's intended to build awareness, but also to do more of a shared learning exercise around the vision and the history of water in Oregon, and how those all the different pieces tie together in regards to health, safety, environment, and the economy. And then the other one is the technical workshops. And so this will be having people that have some expertise and knowledge in the area, looking at white papers that have been developed by the state in order to provide input on those items in regards to data, what we know, what we don't know, what the challenges are. So those are at a high level. Some of the activities that are outlined, again, they're in the preliminary phase, so I won't be able to necessarily answer more questions about it than that. I can see some eager faces. The other thing I will note is that I didn't cover is there is an area for anybody who wants to provide input. And so I'll take us to the next page, and this is where we are looking for feedback. So if you take a look, this is OregonWaterVision.org is the website. It's already been launched. A lot of the information that you have seen here today is on that website. And what I do want to highlight for all of you, as well as for anyone in the room, is that there's two things really that are important to note on this website. The first one is that you can subscribe to a listserv. So this will be where a lot of information about what's going on with the Water Vision effort and these different types of meetings or ways to contribute that are outlined here will be noticed. So I would say subscribe to that. When you click on the subscription link, I tested this out the other day, you'll see it's actually OWEB that has been putting this all together. So the first portion will outline all of OWEB's subscriptions that you can click on. The second, if you scroll down, there's another category, and that's for the Water Vision, and that's where you'd want to subscribe to receive these types of updates. The other thing you might want to click on is share your thoughts. So again, anyone can go to the website, and there's 3 questions that are outlined about the vision, and you can send anyone you would like to that. If there's folks that you think would want to provide input on that, that is available as well as an option right now. So, and that is live. So I think that covers everything that I had. Doug, was there anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, Doug Woodcock, Deputy Director of Water Resources Department. I would take back just a little bit and talk a little bit about the where we're at. We're in our inception of this listening and learning and having these conversations, and so we're still building what these are going to look like exactly. But I would point out that the technical workshops that we're talking about having are really an opportunity to sit down with locals and have conversations about water infrastructure and water funding and water data. So what kind of data do you rely upon when you're making a decision? What kind of water decisions are you going to be making in the next 5 years? What data are you lacking? And this is really a dialogue back and forth to try to help us understand what our priorities are going to be moving forward as we're building this. The other piece would be the water academies. We see that as an opportunity to build some local leaders, some local water leaders. So education opportunities for people who are engaged and want to be engaged that can then champion some of these ideas in the future. And we'll build that network across the state. So just a couple of thoughts there that we've been sharing as we've been building this.
Is that it?
Would you like to?
Just a little more infrastructure here in terms of the points of contact and the leadership around this issue at the state level. There's a group of water directors, including Jason Miner with the governor's office and myself and Richard Whitman and Maida Lofsgaard. We meet regularly, kind of talking about big picture around this effort. Maida has been designated, in addition to being the director at OWEB, she's also now the governor's office lead on this project. So she's putting a lot of time into this effort, and we're all thrilled that she's willing to commit that level of energy to this. We also have, as I mentioned, the water core team, where Doug is our lead, but many agencies are sitting in on those discussions, which are now have ramped up to twice-a-month meetings to coordinate on a range of issues, including the vision. And as I mentioned, Raquel is on the implementation team associated with the vision. I'm expecting that as this starts to roll forward, that we're going to be integrating more of our staff into helping with this effort as it goes forward. It's big. We're trying to build some momentum with our partners across the state around this, and this is all leading to what we hope will be a phase 2. And that phase 2 is where the rubber really hits the road from the standpoint of, if we can all agree that water is important, and if we can all agree that the infrastructure that served us so well for the last 100+ years is in need of reinvestment, or that we need to be thinking about new investments in built and natural infrastructure, how are we going to go about that? How do we support it at the state level from a funding standpoint, knowing that the costs associated with those types of investments are in the billions of dollars over time? And then how do we prioritize where those resources go? If they are state investments, what kind of system of prioritization do we make in terms of making those investments as those projects are being built and developed?
As I shared with Tom earlier, this particular plan makes me giddy. I'm so excited to see the state lead this, the state, and not just our department, but the state, looking at 100-year water vision and water plan. Coming from the public works arena, I always try to make sure my communities look further than just 20 years, because if you're looking 20 years, that, as Mike and I talked earlier, those 20 years go by fast. But when you look at water and changing venue in water, you need to have a long-range plan. So I'm very excited that the department's going to take an integral role in this endeavor. And I got to say kudos to our folks. I wasn't on the commission when we did the IWRS, but thank you for that, because what a roadmap that is for this department in the future. But I do, Tom asked me to take a look at some of the things, so I had a couple of just thoughts on the list at the back. Under the vision, so the IWRS talks about climate change, half-century stress on water. Let me see the 3 items: climate change, half-century, and underinvestment, so aging infrastructure is what I would call that, and then changing population. But when you read the vision, it says address changes in climate change population dynamics. And then when you read the shared water future, it says the same thing. And I wonder if we shouldn't add aging infrastructure, those 3 key elements all the way through. I'm not sure why we dropped it out of those 2 statements. I loved your shared water future. I just think it's too far down in the document. It just seems like that should be, what is this about? Why do we need a 100-year vision? And that speaks really clearly of what the need is and why we should all be worried about water and start planning for it. So I also want to pose a question, but I don't know if that's appropriate, but do we have it? So you start with the vision, and what is the question following that? Do we have enough water to provide water for 100 years if we don't do this study? It's something that captures people's attention. Those are just a couple quick thoughts for me, but I just don't think we want to leave out that infrastructure piece, because it's a huge part of what we need to address here. So kudos. I think you're going to have a good time with this project. It's water in the larger sense, 100 years, and be able to share that story when you're done with that is, not many people probably get giddy about a water study, but this one makes me pretty excited to see this moving that way, so.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm kind of wondering about what role the commission will play in this. I recognize that, we don't have an authority to, we're not going to make a directive on this, but also it doesn't seem satisfying to just get updates. It seems like there should be some kind of formal recommendations or something that are kind of representative of the regions and the issues we face, which are all captured well in IWRS. But I'm just trying to look for a way for our role to be meaningful without overstepping our bounds, I guess.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that question and the interest underlying it. I think at this point I would ask for commissioners just to hang on a little bit, because this is an enterprise effort, and so we have other boards and commissions, and I'm not sure where they're at and what kind of interface they're having at this point. So I don't want to get out in front of that. So I think this is a topic that we can talk more about with some of the teams that we are working with, so that we're kind of providing equal opportunity for boards and commissions who have an extra interest in this. So we will, as I mentioned at the outset, we will be bringing this back in November, so there's going to be some more opportunity for us to talk in the public setting, and there may be, by that time, we may have some more kind of definitive ideas or suggestions on how the commission can engage.
Thank you. Any further questions?
Yeah. Yeah, I just have one comment on your outreach. Don't forget the high schools, and don't forget our state colleges and universities. Those are the people that we're training up, that we're going to have to be living what we decide, or we think we might decide. So I think it's important to figure out a way to get that input and that kind of general input. Yeah, they don't know a whole lot, but they think they do. So it's great to get some of that pulled out, because you never know what you might find hiding in somebody's brain. Just a thought.
I think that's a great idea, and it makes me think about one of the things that we are trying to build into this process is to reach out to more than just the traditional stakeholders, and you get into communities that may not be water right holders, but the community that benefits from water is every Oregonian, essentially. And we just need to make sure that we are, in our outreach efforts, and we're really trying hard to make sure that we are reaching out to communities that we wouldn't just normally reach out to. So your idea is right in that realm, so thank you for that feedback.
No other comments then? Okay, thank you. Thank you for your report, and we look forward to more coming on that. We do have one comment, April Snell, on this particular agenda item. So, and just a reminder, while April's coming up, if anyone has comments, we will be taking public comment. Just fill out the yellow sheet just outside the door and give it to Cindy. So, April, we'll go ahead and give the time to you.
Commissioner Corn, members of the Commission, for the record, April Snell, Director of the Oregon Water Resources Congress. I would like to preface my remarks with a preface. No, I'm just kidding. That's for you, Tom. I have been told that I do preface things in a way that makes it seem like I'm going to say something truly terrible. And see, I just did it right there. But it is actually, I do think this water vision is one of the single most important things that's been before us. And the us is both us in this room and us as a state. And I think, Commissioner Fott, you said it makes you giddy. It makes me a bit nervous, but that's because I've been doing this for long enough to know how fraught this work is. And the paranoia around water issues cannot be understated. But I do think that the fact that we as a state and as individuals are talking about water and how we look to the future to find a better way forward is extremely wonderful and very positive. Now, where it goes and what it leads to, I think, is something we have to be very cautious in not making promises. Of course, I can't make promises that I can't control, and there's a lot of things that I might like to see out of this. But for me, that we're talking about it is a really important step forward. The fact that we have our governor's office supporting and putting some resources and encouraging the agencies to do this process is also extremely important. In looking at that vision document, Commissioner Fott, you had some, I thought, good remarks on that. That document was put together by the governor's office, I think, starting last summer. And when I was looking at that, you think about those different words and what those mean to different people. And for my members who operate irrigation districts and similar entities who are charged with operating and maintaining rather large delivery systems that have to bring water to farms and other users, their primary concern is aging infrastructure. How do they get more funding to do piping, rehab, repair, different sorts of facilities, add fish passage, different things like that. But the path and how they get there, there are a lot of different paths that lead there. And for me, there's the role that I have with OWRC, which is trying to find things that work for my members. But I also think there's the greater role, which is that for us all together in our various water sectors to be talking about what these words on the paper mean, as well as the longer term, what do we do about it and how do we get there, that's the important work. And I'm excited to have more informal conversations with other water entities about what their water vision is and what their needs are. And infrastructure doesn't necessarily mean, I'm learning, it doesn't always mean the same things to different people, and I think that's something I'm learning, and I'm looking forward to learning more. But Commissioner Quimps, you actually articulated the question that I'm getting to, which is, what is the role of this commission as this effort moves forward? And as Director Byler wisely said, this effort is very early in its stages, but it's something, obviously, I'm biased because I interact with you guys the most, but I do think there is a role in some fashion. And, just as Raquel was saying, there's all these different ways that people can provide input, but I'm sure that some people in some fashion are going to feel like they weren't involved or didn't have an opportunity to contribute. And so I'll say, since this is on the record, I think there's an opportunity for everybody to be at the table and everybody to contribute in some way, but there may be a need to have to pull that feedback out a little bit. So a little bit longer than I meant to, but I'm also very excited. I appreciate the leadership of Director Byler and the core water team in moving this effort forward, and I'm excited about what will come and how we can all be collaborating together for a better water future with less conflict. So, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Anything else? We'll go ahead and move on to D. We're in that. Let's see what are we? D. Strategic plan implementation. So,
Commissioner Korn, I am going to try to move through this very quickly because we're behind, and see if we can get caught up a little bit on our time. Thank you. So you may recall, I hope you recall, that we adopted the strategic plan at the November meeting for 2018, and I wanted to update you on what we've been up to since that time. Just want to remind you of kind of what this is tethered to. Why did we develop this strategic plan? Really, this is an effort to connect, again, to the integrated water resources strategy and our broader programs, but we're moving the elevation down, and this is much more oriented towards, it's definitely solely oriented towards our domain and what we do and how we go about our actions and how we prioritize our work. So prioritizing our work and our day-to-day functions is a big element of the plan. Promoting a positive and productive workplace and improving our communication internally is our big goals that continue to drive the thought process for us as we move forward into the strategic plan. You may recall under the kind of the three big priorities that we identified in the strategic plan, kind of buckets, if you will, that we are now working toward implementing projects around. They are, in very basic terms, I think of them in terms of modernizing how we go about our business, which can mean a lot of different things, but it really does, in its essence, mean that we need to be constantly looking for improvement. We need to be looking for ways to engage our stakeholders and provide tools for them and our staff that are current with the times. So, for example, one element that we talk about a lot in terms of modernizing our efforts, our work, is to move more and more towards information technology tools, online applications for water transactions, for example. That's part of the mix of things that we look at, but just using that as an example. The other big priority bucket that we talked about under the strategic plan is to work towards our future, our water future. That is, making sure that we can all get distracted by the day-to-day, especially during really bad water years. But we need to continue to work with our partners around the state to help them meet their long-term needs, and which, as we know, as we talk about a variety of different issues, whether it's the groundwater issues in Mosier or in other communities are facing scarcity, this is not it's not a sprint, it's a marathon, but we need to have a sense of urgency. We need to be working towards long-term goals with those communities, and it takes a lot of time and effort. I then the last big bucket is fostering a forward-looking team dedicated to serving Oregonians with integrity and excellence. That statement embodies the core values that we developed with our staff over the time that we've been working on the strategic plan, and is a extremely important element, and maybe my own personal priority in terms of the work that I want us to do to help us move forward with the three priorities under the strategic plan. That one really speaks to the fundamentals of are we providing the tools and training for our staff and our managers to carry out our work as effectively and productively as possible with no matter how many staff we have, whatever our capacity is. And that's been a really big focus for us as a management team as we've been working on these issues. So as I mentioned at the outset, the strategic plan was adopted at the end of 2018. Well, of course, the legislative session in 2019 started up right after that, and we knew that I knew that I was going to hit the wall very quickly in terms of my time. And that's exactly what happened. We got very distracted with, and appropriately so, with the legislative session. And we were really concerned about not losing the thread of the strategic plan during that time. So we identified three projects that we wanted to launch early in 2019, and we are engaging in those projects in a way that's different than we've practiced in the past as an agency and as a management team, whereas we are developing project plans and work plans associated with those, reporting out to our management team over time with updates, and really trying to work on the communication and organization around those projects. Those three projects are, one, to begin promoting the core values agency-wide. So we've been working on signage. We've got a team of staff who are helping us they're developing recommendations on what we can do to better, to get the core values really integrated into our thought process on a regular basis among staff. That's been a great effort. Really proud of the staff who have been working on that. I think they've been doing a fantastic job. I think, Eric, you've been involved in that. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm on the project lead.
Yeah. So it's been good, and we still have ways to go. It's the process, but I've been excited about the level of effort and interest at the staff level and among the managers as well. The other two projects have to do with accepting credit card payments at the front desk. This is a modernization piece. It seems it's pretty simple and straightforward piece, but it is a step in a much longer path that we have in terms of the various things that we want to do to modernize our systems so that they are more contemporary and that people can use them effectively. We have a long way to go more broadly. This is a first step in the right direction. So we've been getting report outs on that, and we're hoping that that will be completed by the end of this calendar year. The other piece is around communication and modernization as well, where we're developing some automatically generated emails to communicate with applicants for our water, who apply for different water transactions, so that they know, they're reminded of where they're at in the queue and who they can contact if they have questions. That's not a service that we provide right now, and I think that that would not only benefit our applicants, but it would also benefit our staff to have that reminder become automated and implemented into our systems. So we've been making good progress on that. We're expecting that to be completed this fall. The other thing that we started to do around as the legislative session was ending is begin to practice a portfolio management approach. And portfolio management is simply a way to prioritize workload. And it's not something that we have done as an entity in the past. It's not something I've done in my career, quite frankly. But it's a really important element that we're wrestling with today and through the summer months. Really around the notion that one of the big premises of underlying the need for our strategic plan, from my perspective, is we've got way too much work to do, and we have limited capacity to carry it out. And we need to get better organized so that we understand what our capacity is, so that we can direct our resources to the right things. And the portfolio management approach helps us to start practice that analysis, so we can better understand what we're doing, who's doing it, and what our priorities are associated with that. So we started a process. It's imperfect, quite frankly. We're starting to put this into practice, and as I've learned, because I went through some training around this early in the summer, is that it's that you develop a system over time. What's really important is that you start the process and start the conversation. And it's been really gratifying, frankly, in the conversations I've been having with the executive team so far, where we're talking about projects before we just leap into them strategically, and thinking about our resources and what sequence we might carry out in engaging in different areas within programs and divisions within the agency. So this has become a tool for us to be able to talk through those issues. What we did in this case was we decided that we would ask our managers for ideas on projects that fit within those three big buckets, those priorities that I mentioned: the modernization, the future look, and the internal. That they think we should be looking at for this biennium and working on this biennium, and we would go through a prioritization exercise around that. And that is not all of our workload by a long shot. That's just on top of our kind of ongoing regular duties. So there's, right out of the chute, I'm recognizing that we're not covering all of what we do, but this is a way for us to start putting into practice these management tools that I think will help us over time. 58 projects were proposed. We're in the process of reviewing those now. I can tell you that we won't do 58 projects in the biennium. In fact, it will be a very small number of those, I think, that we will tackle. And it's leading to some conversations as we've looked at those projects where we might be able to lump some ideas together that came from different managers into a more programmatic approach. So it's a work in progress, but I'm very excited about it. I think that frankly, we're embarked on some culture change within the agency and how we're trying to organize ourselves so that we can move forward. And what I think will be placing a big emphasis on going forward is investing in our internal aspects, in terms of kind of making sure that our staff, managers and staff, every one of us, have the fundamentals down, that we know and that we have the tools and training so that we can carry out our work effectively, communicate effectively both internally and externally, and know that we need to put those tools and training into practice over time. It's not just a one-time deal, it's a commitment over the long term. So we're moving in that direction. It's taken time, of course, as everything does, but I'm pretty darn excited about the effort that we've taken so far. I'll have more to report out to you and more specifics to report out to you at our next meeting. I think I just covered, so we're just wrap up. We're completing those 3 projects that I mentioned, and as I said, we'll have a report out in November on kind of the short list of projects that we are going to emphasize that we've identified through the portfolio management prioritization effort. And that's it.
Yeah. First of all, a statement and then a question. I was actually really heartened to see or hear that the integrated water resources strategy was the foundation of our day-to-day work strategy, I guess. Or so to me, what's important with that is our strategic plan is connected to the IWRS as well as the 100-year plan, both at different scales. And I think that's really important. Perhaps I wasn't giddy to begin with, but now I am. So that leads me to the one question I had in your presentation, Director Byler. You were talking about prioritizing workload. You had 58 projects. You're going to narrow that down to some unspecified but substantially smaller level. And I'm wondering how that information then starts to feed into future funding requests.
Very good question. Thank you. It already has it already has stimulated discussions as we've gone through the list. We developed a template so that everyone was kind of filling out a template with and responding to similar questions. So all the managers that provided ideas were working within that box. And through that, we were able to determine whether, I guess ripeness was kind of one of the questions. You want to do this project, do we have the resources today and the staff available to do that? And in some cases, the answer was no, and we need resources in order to be able to carry it out, whether it's staff or funding to hire a contractor, you name it. It did raise directly and indirectly a lot of conversation about kind of future budget requests, and it's great because we're going to start actually talking about future budget requests this fall for 2021, and so we've already gotten a little bit of a head start on some of those ideas.
Thank you. Any further questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So we'll go ahead now and move on to item E. Dwight, those rules coming up. Review of upcoming rulemaking, Vision 522 to the Chutes Basin Water Management.
Okay. Good afternoon, Chair Corn and members of the Commission. My name is Dwight French, Water Rights Services Division Administrator. I'm going to start out today by giving you some background on this Deschutes groundwater mitigation program, because my overall topic today is this preview of an upcoming rulemaking that we've started to work on. And I don't want to assume that you know about the Deschutes mitigation program, so you've all heard bits of it before, but I'm going to speed over to the top of that to give you a little context in case you need it, or to re-ground you in case you've forgotten some of these elements. So in 1993, the U.S. Geological Survey initiated the Deschutes Basin Groundwater Study, and our department cooperated in that effort. In 1998, the conclusions of the study were available, and it showed a direct hydraulic connection between groundwater and surface water within the study area. You can see the study area is a little darker gray area on the map there. This meant that groundwater use within the study area had the potential for a substantial interference with surface water, and thus would measurably reduce the scenic waterway flows. This was a real big deal at the time because no surface water was available for new appropriations inside the study area, and except for some water for storage. And WRD was unable to issue any new groundwater permits within the study area. So in 2002, the commission adopted our Deschutes groundwater mitigation rules in Division 505, and the Deschutes Basin Mitigation Bank and Mitigation Credit Rules in Division 521. That rulemaking effort created a pathway for new groundwater permits within the Deschutes groundwater study area to be issued with mitigation. So here are the elements of the mitigation program. In case you have forgotten, mitigation is required for all new groundwater permits within the study area. The program identifies tools for providing mitigation through either a mitigation project or by obtaining mitigation projects from an established project. The program establishes a system of mitigation credits which may be used to offset the impacts of new groundwater permits. The program set a cap of 200 cubic feet per second on all final orders within the study area, new groundwater permit final orders. And the program provides the process to establish mitigation banks and provides for adaptive management through annual evaluations and a review of the program every 5 years. A couple years later, the legislature added their own 5-year reporting requirement. And so in 2021 will be our first combined 5-year rule and legislatively required report, kind of blending those together in a couple years from now. Currently, we have 3 mitigation banks that have been approved by the commission, but only one is active. That is the Deschutes River Conservancy. So then, a few years later, the commission adopted Division 522. That is the subject of this rulemaking that I'm here to talk to you about today. Those rules are also related to the groundwater mitigation program. The rules set forth how the department will count new, reduced, canceled, and partially canceled groundwater permits under the allocation cap, and lets those unused credits, if a permit is canceled or partially canceled, allows those credits to be reused on some other application that needs credits. It also, these Division 522 rules clarifies how municipal and quasi-municipal permit holders can provide mitigation under incremental development plans. So they can provide mitigation in pieces over time as they're developing their permit. The rules also allow a mitigation project to provide direct mitigation for a specific groundwater application. So before I explain the need for this rulemaking, I want to break down some of these terms because these terms are important as I explain a little further why we think we need this rulemaking. So when someone applies for a new groundwater permit inside the study area, The department issues an initial review and explains to the applicant this issue about groundwater connectivity inside the study area and identifies that mitigation is going to be needed. And the initial review also identifies what the mitigation obligation is, how much mitigation you're going to need to come up with in order to have a permit issued. Let me see, got to catch up with my notes here. So a mitigation project is a project approved by the department that results in water that is protected in stream. So we have two examples to date that we've used many times over and over again. Permanent in-stream transfers that cause an out-of-stream water right to be transferred in-stream. That's an example of a project. And another one is a temporary in-stream lease, which if that lease is held by the bank, then that can result in mitigation credits that can be used by one of these applicants. So mitigation water is water that is legally protected for in-stream use from the implementation of a mitigation project, and it's calculated in acre feet. So, and one more term, a credit is a mitigation credit is a means of accounting for mitigation water, also calculated in acre feet, made available by a mitigation project. Mitigation credits are determined and awarded by the department. So in order, you have application received by the department inside the study area. We let the person know, the applicant know what their mitigation obligation is. And they kind of have a decision to make at that time. They can go right to a bank and buy mitigation credits, or buy mitigation credits from somebody who holds credits on their own. Or they can go what I call the do-it-yourself route, the DIY route, which, like any do-it-yourself project, is not as simple as hiring someone to do the work for you. You would identify your own mitigation project, like a in-stream transfer or an in-stream lease. Once you get that project finished, then you end up with mitigation water that is now being protected in stream, and the department can recognize that and issue mitigation credits that you can hold, either use for your own application or sell or give to somebody else. All right. So our existing rules in Division 522, they allow unused permanent mitigation credits to be reassigned to meet new mitigation obligations. But only if you have mitigation credits can they be reassigned. It does not allow mitigation water to be reassigned to new mitigation obligations. So let me kind of explain that again. Now we're way down in the weeds of the mitigation program. And let me give you walk you through this in a flow chart. So groundwater application received, you've got a mitigation obligation. You can go the top route and purchase mitigation, either going on the far top route through a mitigation bank or from another existing user who has mitigation credits to sell, and you end up with mitigation credits for your application. Or you can go the bottom route. You have your mitigation obligation. You can develop a project. Once that project is completed, it results in mitigation water in the stream. And for 9 of our projects to date that have ended up with mitigation water, it's this counting stopped right there. We did not award mitigation credits. So what we want to do for those 9 projects that ended up with mitigation water is devise a system in the rules where the department can change that mitigation water or recognize that mitigation water as credits that could be used by somebody else. So again, providing clarity on awarding mitigation credits for 9 existing mitigation projects. Here's the location of those 9 existing projects. One of our, I know we've had a couple of questions, so how did you come up with this great idea to work on this rulemaking? Well, and a permit holder came to us and said, I hold on to a permit, and I hold 2 mitigation projects that ended up with mitigation water. I got my permit issued. I've got a lot of mitigation water at my disposal that I've used on my application, but I might not develop my permit. And I don't see in the rules how I can resell my credits to another user like folks who have mitigation credits. If I would have gotten credits, I could assign those credits to somebody else if my permit was canceled, voluntarily canceled. But because I ended up with mitigation water, I can't reassign some or all of my mitigation credits to somebody else because I don't have mitigation credits. I just have mitigation water. So, and you might remember the cities of Lapine and the city of Bend speaking before the department and kind of encouraging the department to look for ways to cause additional credits to be available in their zones of impact. And this would be one mechanism that would result in more credits being available for people like the city of Bend and Lapine to use. So we took a look at these 9 projects that didn't end up with credits. There's the potential to make more credits available in these different zones. A lot in the general zone and some in each of the other zones. None of these projects exist in the middle Deschutes or the upper Deschutes zone. But it could cause some credits to be available in other zones. Now, some of these 9 projects, most of them are not going to be interested in these rules probably. I mean, they got their mitigation water, they got their permit. We know most of them are out developing their permits, right now, growing into their permits. And they're probably fine and happy and might develop their full permit. If they don't develop their full permit or don't develop any of it, then they might want to have some leftover mitigation water that they could, turn into mitigation credits. So this rule might be, interesting to them then if they don't develop their full permit. So next steps and timelines, we plan to hold 1 or 2 Rules Advisory Committee meetings. Our first one is scheduled for next Wednesday in Bend. After that, after we're done with the RAC meetings, we'll have public comment and a public hearing. And our plan is to be back to the commission for adoption at your first meeting in 2020, whenever that happens to be. So thank you for sitting through that. Last agenda item, way down in the weeds on a warm afternoon. But if you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer them.
I have questions. Can you go back one slide, please?
You bet.
What's the, what's that called, a unit? What's the unit we're looking at there? Is that a credit that equals a CFS or something?
Potential mitigation credits, and a credit is equal to an acre foot.
Acre-foot, great.
Yeah, thank you.
So, if we're doing rulemaking on this, or rulemaking hearings on this already, trains sort of left the station on this? Is that how am I interpreting process correctly there? That this is a department-recommended change? I'm just curious about the process that we're in now.
I would characterize it this way. We are in the process of drafting rules to talk to the Rules Advisory Committee about. We haven't had a meeting with the committee yet. The committee has been identified and invited to our first meeting next Wednesday.
Commissioners, Chair Corn, for the record, Raquel Rancière, Senior Policy Coordinator with the department. To the Commissioner's question, so the process is, I don't know if the Commission is, everyone on the Commission is aware of how the rulemaking process occurs before it gets to you, but the Rules Advisory Committee essentially provides input to us, so it provides us with feedback and advises us so that we have some of that initial information before we go out for a public hearing. So we're at that very early stage where staff have been internally talking about this and drafting up rules for then the Rules Advisory Committee to review and say, hey, have you thought about this? Oh, this word looks a little like you should maybe think of a different word for this. So those are the kinds of things that the Rules Advisory Committee goes through. Then we publish it in the Secretary of State's bulletin and officially open the public comment period. And those are usually a minimum of 30 days, depending on the rulemaking, maybe longer. And after that public comment period closes, then the agency reviews the public comments. We determine whether or not to revise the rules based on that, and that's when we then develop that staff report that comes to all of you that includes the public comments, as well as a note about what the Rules Advisory Committee members did and who they were, and then that comes to you for consideration. So we're at the very early phase of the process, if that context helps you.
It does. I'm wondering where the potential for this to simply be shut down is, or is that, but that's what I mean by has the train left the station on it? Where's the point at which someone could say, I don't think this is a good idea at all, that we shouldn't be making this rule change? Is that a foregone conclusion, or?
Raquel just lined out the public process that lies ahead. We'll have a Rules Advisory Committee, and then we'll have the formal rulemaking will then start, where people can submit comments that will be on the record for our and your consideration. During that time period, anyone could step in and express concern or giddiness or elation.
Okay. I mean, the reason this is this to me, when we were in Redmond, I think when what's the Central Oregon Irrigation District? Is that what it is? And we were talking about this very thing, and I asked them about this because what we're doing is we're monetizing something that otherwise isn't monetizable. It's not transferable currently. And so it opens the door to speculation in my assessment at this level. And I think it's going to happen. And I get really nervous if we are, as a department, encouraging that without really understanding some of the implications, similar sort of thing about what happens on the land when water gets further commoditized in a transferable, monetized market where I mean, over time, something like this is going to be worth more and more and more money. And I'm curious to, it seems like a pretty big deal to me, but maybe I just am overthinking it.
Chair Corn, Commissioner, if I may, and then Tom and Dwight may have something to add to that. So one thing I would keep in mind is this is this is a small portion of the Deschutes mitigation program. We do annual reports to the commission on that program, as well as a 5-year report to the commission, as well as to the Oregon legislature. So I think the question that you're raising, at least in my mind, is a question about the entire program. And so that is something that, may be worth bringing up as we go through the review process to integrate that information and consider that as part of this bigger programmatic question. And so that's just my initial reaction to that. And this is looking at projects that have already been done, essentially. And so I don't know. Anything else to add to that?
I don't see this adjustment as being a major shift of how the program is being implemented. I think it's pretty minor, and I think it actually creates a level playing field that arguably was intended when this was developed. So we're looking back to make a fix of something that we think probably should have. I think our implementation wasn't carrying out the spirit of the program. So we feel like this is a way for us to make that adjustment, address those 9 projects, and be clear about more clear about how things proceed going forward. I don't think it's a game changer in terms of how the program runs in the basin.
So if I'm a water user right holder, and I want to go either of those 2 routes, is it accurate to say that they are equally rigorous in terms of the expectation associated with them? Because that's, if you think of the corollaries in the carbon world, there are people who they want to plant trees because they're carbon credit, but they really won't go through the rigorous assessment it takes to verify those credits and get true mitigation credits associated with them. And so with that as background, when I see those 2 approaches, I think, well, if you're going to make it easier for someone to go through a less rigorous route to simply convert them by this new rule, then future work's going to go in that direction, and you're going to bypass a more rigorous mitigation credit establishment system. A lot of assumptions in that, but that's why I'm concerned. It seems to open the door for abuse.
So, Chair Corn and Commissioner, the whichever route you go gets the same amount of review. So water has to be protected in stream. And in all cases where we've done that, even where we've ended up with just mitigation water and didn't end up with credits, because we had the same concern, I think, that you're sharing now. As we started in this rule, we thought, well, did those projects, when mitigation water was created, did they go through the same review that was done for folks that ended up with mitigation credits? Because if they didn't, we're going to have to figure out how to account for that and cause that whatever steps weren't done to be done now. And how would we do that? So we went through all of the 9 orders that developed that tracked the mitigation project into mitigation water, and we were pleased to find that the exact same review and findings were made that would have been made if they would have gotten mitigation credits. They just weren't awarded mitigation credits at the end of that order. So that was kind of a big sigh of relief for us, and made our, I would call our preliminary rule drafting quite a bit simpler. So we've also, in our draft rules, and they are just draft rules at this point, for folks to chew on and review and give us comments on, we've taken steps to kind of reduce, I guess, to use a word from earlier today, to stop the bleeding. Okay, there's not going to be any more mitigation water that doesn't turn into credits. So take those all the way through, whether people necessarily need that or not. We'll move mitigation projects to mitigation water and then award credits. So that narrows the scope of the rule a little bit and hopefully reduces the number of what-if questions that we get and would otherwise struggle with during the rulemaking process.
You can concern though that it's creating a market outside of these rules. In other words, a private market that someone says, to get the mitigation, I'm going to pay huge amounts of money, or maybe to get that to hold it for speculation later.
Well, I appreciate your reminder that we've already done that by creating the mitigation program, period. I'm not familiar enough with it. I just am I'm being very liberal in the ability to ask questions about something that at a gut level, I feel like, wait a minute, I've seen this before, and these kinds of things, the market just does some really funky stuff when a commodity becomes dear, and there's no question that this commodity is dear, becoming more dear. So it's as simple as that. We've already made the decision to commoditize it at some level. I just want to make sure we're not making a different sort of incentive that all of a sudden leads to further speculation that is divorced from some of the larger community issues that will be driven, especially how this affects land use.
So this is an acre feet, correct, these credits? So
That's right.
So you have about 2,700 acre feet there, and that's cleaning up the problems from the past program, or is that going to be a fluid number that changes over time depending on participation, and that's just the current status? Are we talking about making rules to clean up this last 2,700 acre feet, I guess is my question.
So, Commissioner, Chair Corning, Commissioner Quimps, the 2,700 or approximately that total number up there represents the largest number of acre feet possible that we think could take advantage of this rulemaking. Like I said, I think we have one person who owns 2 projects that became mitigation water that they've used for their permit. They're interested in this rulemaking. We haven't done a straw poll to see who else might be involved or interested. I would, I don't want to venture a guess of who might be interested beyond the one, the 2 projects that are under one permit, but it's a maximum number.
Couple comments. One, the permittee that Dwight's referencing, and I don't know what the other scale of this might be, but it will put more available credits into the area, which is a need that many of the municipalities in particular have been expressing out of concern about the prices going up. So we see that in the short term, that could be a very beneficial thing for the community. The other thing I wanted to mention to you is just a reminder that we are, by statute, required to report and review this program periodically. And we have one coming up in the next couple of years that's pretty comprehensive. And that's really, to me, that's really the forum where we can address those bigger macro questions that Commissioner Mall is referencing. In my view, this rulemaking certainly related to the program, but it's not transformational in terms of its impact on the program. In some respects, the ship has launched, and it launched a long time ago. But the questions you're raising are important ones, and they will continue to be part of the dialogue as we go forward.
As a part of this rulemaking, is there a way to look at the whole program in terms of its? Can you put a rider on this portion of the program that looks at ways to generate revenue for the department out of this? In terms of the transfers, when a mitigation credit is sold, that some portion of it needs to come back to the department, so it goes into its research and monitoring and that sort of thing. Is that or does that become a very separate sort of thing?
I wouldn't recommend that we try to pull that into this rulemaking that we're proposing today, just for the timing purposes that we have in front of us. But those are the types of issues that I think are within the realm of candidates for discussion when we look at the program more broadly through these review processes.
Thank you.
And if I can add one thing, Chair Corn and Commissioner Moll, just I feel like I need to mention there is a fee associated with mitigation in our fee structure already. So if starting in 2009, so not too long after these rules became the mitigation program and the Deschutes got going, of course we realized, hey, this mitigation stuff is it's taken a lot of time. So in 2009, the legislature adopted a change, an addition to our fee structure that, and now I'm going to forget what the exact fee amount is, but it's around $600 if your application can only be approved with mitigation and you're successful in supplying mitigation, then before we issue the permit, you have to provide us with that fee amount. And it's a relatively small number in terms of the whole program as a whole. It just offsets a small piece of our water right application review process. So I just kind of, for the record, we have a small fee. Yeah.
So, yeah, I guess if I just may, because I think all my questions have been asked and answered, but what I'd like to do is just really quickly summarize what I think I heard. And that's the 2,700 acre feet is a cap. It's the largest that we would expect to see be picked up in this program, or these rule changes.
That is correct.
That the 2,700 acre feet is not a very substantive part of the overall program for the amount of credits that have been used. And the one subtlety that I'm still struggling with a little bit, Tom, is that however the 2,700 acre feet may be important for the number of credits that are currently available for use, like for one of the municipalities.
That too is correct.
Okay.
At least at least the city of Bend and the city of Lapine have been fairly vocal in asking, everybody that'll listen for help in finding or identifying ways to create more credits that they could use. The thought being, if more credits are available, the price goes down, and that makes it easier for cities like Lapine, who's relatively small, and Bend, to use. Now, whether or not it makes a big change or a little change, I don't know yet, but.
Thanks, and that helps me, although I'm not sure if that's going to, the Keynesian economics we've just heard about will solve your issues with the costs of the credits, or the speculation. What's that?
Can we get Keynes back on staff?
Yeah. Thank you.
So, yeah, thanks. Can you go back to your previous slide, the one that shows the two different directions, this flow chart? This chart to me kind of told the story. It's like and I think, Tom, you said this, it's kind of, we missed this one step here in terms of giving people two options to go for mitigation credits. And I think, so this helps me when you say we're just trying to clean this piece up. When I see this chart, that helps a lot, so thanks for doing that. I understand some of the concerns that you have, Joe. There are a lot of pros and cons with the mitigation, so if the commission's deciding to talk about that some more, it'd be nice to have a really in-depth review of how we're doing and how it's working, because there are certainly benefits to municipals, where that helps provide more water for municipals as well as, I'm sure irrigations as well. So I think it'd take a long time, and you'd have to really work through that issue, since that program's already well on its way. I think it's just I think we've got to be careful if we're even considering making those changes to it. So, thanks.
Any further comments or questions? Okay, Cindy, we don't have any further public comments, do we? Okay, nothing else, no other business, then we'll go ahead and adjourn. 5 minutes early. Well, that clock's slow.